The Galactic Council Chamber was the largest room in the known universe. It floated in the empty space between three galaxies, built by species that had died long before humans learned to make fire. The walls were made of living crystal that changed color with the mood of those inside. Today, the crystals glowed a calm blue. That would not last long. Ambassador walked slowly to the central podium. His feet made no sound on the ancient floor. Around him sat representatives from 47 different species. Some had scales like his own. Some had fur. Some had no bodies at all and existed only as clouds of thinking gas. All of them watched him with curiosity. His people were known throughout the galaxy as conquerors. They had the largest fleet, the strongest soldiers, the most advanced weapons. When they wanted something, they took it. No one had ever stopped them. No one had ever tried. So when opened his mouth and spoke, the entire chamber went silent. "The Empire formally surrenders," he said. His voice was steady, but his hands were shaking. "We request asylum from this council. We request protection." The blue crystals in the walls flickered. Then they turned yellow with confusion. High Arbiter leaned forward in her seat. She was an ancient beyond measure, with compound eyes that had seen empires rise and fall. She had led this council for 300 years. In all that time, she had never heard words like these. "Ambassador," she said slowly, "surely there is some mistake. The Empire does not surrender. You have conquered 11 species. Your fleet controls 3 sectors. To whom could you possibly be surrendering?" His throat sac pulsed with shame. Among his people, this was the greatest sign of weakness. He did not care anymore. "To the humans," he said, "the humans of Earth, Sol System, Sector 7G. For a moment, nothing happened. Then laughter broke out across the chamber. Delegate of the Merchant Consortium was laughing so hard his tentacles were shaking. "Earth," he said between gasps. "That little rock. Ambassador, Earth is a Category 2 world. They haven't even left their own solar system. They spend most of their time fighting each other over invisible lines in the dirt." "They have nuclear weapons," someone else called out. "Barely enough to destroy their own planet, not even close to threatening a real fleet. Their fastest ships take years to reach their nearest planet," another delegate added. "They're primitives." The laughter continued, waited. When the chamber finally grew quiet, he spoke again. 6 cycles ago, High Command looked at Earth and saw exactly what you see now. A primitive world. An easy target. Standard resources, standard population, standard resistance capability. The perfect planet for a quiet annexation. He paused. The crystals in the walls were turning a deeper shade of yellow. "We sent 200,000 soldiers," continued. "Our finest warriors, our best equipment. We expected the operation to take 10 days, 20 at most." High Arbiter's compound eyes narrowed. "And how long did it take, Ambassador?" "It is still ongoing," said. "Or it was, until High Command ordered a full retreat 7 days ago." The laughter had stopped completely now. The chamber was so quiet that could hear the hum of the translation devices embedded in every seat. "Of the 200,000 soldiers we sent to Earth," he said, 43 have returned." The crystals turned red. Delegate was no longer laughing. His tentacles had gone still. That's not possible. Your soldiers have personal shields, energy weapons, orbital support. How could primitives with chemical rockets and metal bullets kill that many of your warriors?" Reached into his robe and pulled out a small device. "I have footage," he said, "by 7 independent intelligence services. I came here to warn you, to warn all of you." He activated the device, and a hologram appeared in the center of the chamber. It showed a city burning. Human buildings, primitive by galactic standards, were collapsing into rubble. In the streets, soldiers advanced in formation, their armor gleaming, their weapons ready. "This is the city the humans call Sol," said. "Population, 10 million. Our forces entered on day 3 of the invasion. We expected to secure it within hours. The hologram flickered and the image changed. Now it showed the same streets, but everything was different. The formation had broken. Soldiers were running, not advancing. Bodies lay everywhere, and not all of them were human. "This is the same street 6 hours later," said. "We lost 4,000 soldiers in that city alone, not to their military, to their civilians." A murmur ran through the chamber. The crystals were pulsing now, shifting between red and orange. "They came out of buildings with weapons we had never seen," continued. "Homemade things, bottles filled with burning liquid, metal pipes packed with explosive powder. They threw themselves at our soldiers knowing they would die, mothers, fathers, elderly, children old enough to carry a weapon. They did not run. They did not hide. They fought." High Arbiter raised one of her many limbs. "Surely your orbital forces could have ended this. A single bombardment from space." "We tried," interrupted. "We destroyed 17 of their cities from orbit, millions dead in moments." He looked around the chamber and his eyes were haunted. It only made them angrier. He deactivated the hologram and stood in silence for a moment. "I came here to surrender," he said finally. "Not because we lost the war. We could have won. We could have burned their entire planet to ash and claimed the empty rock for ourselves." "Then why didn't you?" Delegate asked. Scales had gone pale, almost white. "Because they would have let us. They would have watched their world burn rather than kneel, and some of them would have found a way to survive, to remember, to come for us later." He gathered his documents with trembling hands. "I came here to warn you," he said again. "Earth is not a primitive world. It is a death trap, and the creatures that live there are not like any species this council has ever known." He turned and walked toward the exit, his guards falling in around him. "Mark my words," he said without looking back. "One day the humans will leave their little planet. They will build ships that cross the stars. They will join this council or they will burn it down." The doors closed behind him. In the chamber, 47 species sat in perfect, terrified silence. The crystals in the walls had turned black. No one knew what to say. No one knew what to do. And somewhere, far away in Sector 7G, on a small blue planet called Earth, the humans were looking up at the stars and dreaming of the day they would reach them. They would remember what had been done to them. They would remember everything. General was drinking his 3rd cup of coffee when the world changed forever. He was 52 years old, a career military man who had spent his life preparing for wars that never came. He worked in a gray building in Seoul, surrounded by screens and papers and young officers who thought they understood conflict because they had studied it in books. Knew better. Real war was chaos. Real war was surprise. Real war came when you least expected it. It came on a Tuesday morning in March. The first report arrived at 6:47 a.m. A fishing boat near had captured footage of something falling from the sky. Not a plane, not a satellite, something else. Something that moved against the wind, something that glowed. Watched the footage 17 times. Then he made a phone call that would change history. "Get me the president," he said. "Get me the Americans, get me everyone." Within 3 hours, the world knew what was coming. Within 6 hours, the aliens had landed. They came down in 3 places at once: a valley in Switzerland, a desert in Nevada, a mountain range in Korea. Their ships were black and smooth like giant seeds falling from a poisoned tree. When they opened, soldiers poured out, hundreds of them, thousands. They were tall, these creatures, covered in dark scales. They moved like water, smooth and fast. Their weapons made no sound, but wherever they pointed them, things died. Buildings, vehicles, people. The first day was the worst. In Nevada, the aliens destroyed a military base in 40 minutes. In Switzerland, they walked through the streets of Zurich like ghosts, killing anyone who ran. In Korea, they took the mountain passes and began moving towards Seoul. Watched it all from his command center. He saw his soldiers fight and die. He saw tanks burn like paper. He saw helicopters fall from the sky like broken birds. And through it all, he thought of one thing: how do we survive this? The answer came from the strangest place. Doctor was a young scientist, barely 30 years old. She worked at a university, studying animals and plants and the way life evolved on Earth. She had never held a gun. She had never seen a dead body. But when the military brought her a captured alien, she looked at it with calm, curious eyes. "It's afraid," she said. The officers around her laughed. The creature was 7 feet tall, covered in armor, with claws that could tear through steel. It was strapped to a table with chains thick enough to hold a truck. How could something like this be afraid? But was right. She spent 3 days studying the creature before it died. She learned how its body worked. She learned what it ate, how it breathed, where its weak points were. And she learned something else, something that changed everything. "They're not monsters," she told General when she finally delivered her report. "They're soldiers, just soldiers. They have families, they have fears. They bleed and die just like us." She showed him the scans. The alien's heart was in its throat. Its eyes couldn't see well in darkness. Its armor had gaps, thin places where the plates didn't quite connect. "They're stronger than us," said. "Faster, better equipped, but they're not invincible. They can be killed." Looked at the scans for a long time. Then he smiled for the first time in days. "Tell me everything," he said. The second week of the invasion was different. Humanity stopped running. Humanity started fighting back. In Moscow, engineers took apart captured alien weapons and figured out how they worked. In Tokyo, scientists developed a frequency that jammed alien communications. In Berlin, factories began producing new bullets, new bombs, new ways to kill. But the real change happened in places where there were no scientists, no engineers, no generals. In a small village in India, a farmer named Ravi discovered that alien shields flickered when hit with enough electricity. He killed 3 of them with a car battery and jumper cables before they shot him down. His neighbors buried him as a hero and taught his trick to everyone they knew. In Brazil, a teenage girl named Sophia learned that the aliens couldn't track body heat through water. She led 50 survivors through underground rivers to safety, then went back to guide 50 more. In Korea, an elderly woman named refused to leave her home when the aliens came to her village. She sat in her wheelchair in the middle of the street and waited. When they approached her, she pressed a button on a device in her lap. The explosion killed her and 7 alien soldiers. She was 87 years old. She had survived the Korean War as a child. She had told her stories about the Japanese occupation, about her parents who fought and died for freedom. She said she would not live under another enemy's boot. She kept her promise. General collected these stories. He spread them across the world. He showed humanity that the aliens could be hurt, could be stopped, could be killed. And something strange happened. Countries that had been enemies for generations began to work together. Russia shared its intelligence with America. China opened its bases to Japanese pilots. India and Pakistan coordinated their defenses. Israel and Iran found common ground in common blood. For the first time in human history, Earth was truly united. Not by hope, not by peace, not by some dream of a better future. By rage. The aliens had expected humanity to crumble. Every other species they had conquered had done exactly that. They saw superior force and they surrendered. They saw death and they chose life, even life as slaves. But humans were different. Humans had spent their entire history fighting each other. They had invented 1,000 ways to kill, 1,000 ways to suffer, 1,000 ways to make war. They knew pain in ways the aliens could not imagine. And they knew something else, something the aliens had never encountered before. They knew how to hate. Doctor wrote about it later in her journal. She said the aliens made a mistake when they invaded Earth. They thought they were conquering a planet of primitives. They thought they were teaching a lesson to children who had never seen real war. They were wrong. They had awakened something old and terrible, something that lived in the blood of every human being, something that remembered every battle, every massacre, every genocide in human history. They had awakened the spirit that builds empires and burns them down, the spirit that refuses to kneel, the spirit that would rather die fighting than live on its knees. And that spirit was angry. By the end of the first month, the aliens controlled less than 5% of Earth's surface. Their casualty rate was climbing every day. Their soldiers were starting to refuse orders. Some of them were killing themselves rather than return to the ground. They had come to conquer a primitive world. They had found something else entirely. They had found humanity. And humanity was just getting started. Captain was not supposed to survive. When his unit was ambushed on the third day of fighting, everyone expected him to die with his men. The aliens had surrounded them in a narrow valley in the mountains. They had superior numbers, superior weapons, superior everything. Standard military thinking said there was only one outcome. Did not believe in standard military thinking. He was 34 years old, a quiet man with kind eyes and rough hands. Before the war, he had been the kind of soldier who did his job without complaint. He never sought glory. He never asked for medals. He just wanted to serve his country and go home to his family. His wife was waiting for him in. His daughter had just turned 7. He kept a letter in his pocket, words he had written to them on the night before the invasion, words he never got to send. When the aliens closed their trap, had 17 soldiers left, 17 out of 200. They were tired, wounded, and running low on ammunition. Any reasonable commander would have surrendered. Gathered his people in the shadow of a great rock and spoke quietly. "My grandfather showed me these mountains when I was a boy," he said. "He told me stories about the men who hid here during the Japanese occupation. He told me about the refugees who escaped through these caves during the War of 1950. This land remembers, and so do we." He pointed to a dark opening in the rock face, nearly invisible in the shadow. "We go underground," he said. "We learn their weaknesses, we teach them fear." Private was the first to volunteer. She was 19 years old, a communications specialist who had never fired a weapon before the invasion. She had watched her entire squad die in the first hour of fighting. She had crawled through mud and blood to reach position. When he asked who would follow him into the dark, she stepped forward without hesitation. "I'm with you, Captain," she said, "until the end." The others followed, all 17 of them. For 6 weeks, they lived like ghosts in the mountain. The caves went deep, deeper than any map showed. His grandfather had been right. Generations of Koreans had hidden in these tunnels, had carved them wider, had left behind supplies and secrets. There was water. There was food. There was darkness that the alien eyes could not see through. And there was rage. Was the one who discovered that the alien shields could be broken. She spent days taking apart captured equipment, studying the technology with nothing but candlelight and determination. The shields were powered by small cells in the armor. If you could damage those cells, the shield would flicker and die. She built the first EMP grenade from car batteries and copper wire. It was ugly. It was heavy. It barely worked. It killed 2 aliens on its first use. Sergeant Minyu was the one who learned to fight them hand to hand. He had been an MMA fighter before joining the army, a man who understood violence in ways that frightened even his friends. He studied the captured alien bodies with clinical precision. He found the gaps in their armor, the weak points in their joints, the soft tissue beneath their throat plates. The first time he killed an alien with his knife, the others watched in silence. He had moved so fast, so precisely, that the creature never made a sound. It just fell, dark blood pouring from its neck, its eyes full of surprise. "They die like everything else," Minyu said, wiping his blade clean. "They just need to be shown how." But it was himself who became the legend. The aliens called him the Ghost. They said he could appear from nowhere and vanish into nothing. They said he could not be killed. They said he was not human at all, but some spirit of the mountain that had awakened to defend its home. They were wrong about most of it, but they were right about one thing. Could not be stopped. He killed his first alien on the 4th day of hiding. A patrol had come too close to the cave entrance and had crept out in the darkness to deal with it. He used a rock, just a rock, heavy in his hand, brought down again and again until the creature stopped moving. He killed his 10th on the 12th day, his 20th on the 19th. By the end of the 6th week, his count had reached 37. The aliens sent entire companies to hunt him. He led them into traps, ambushes, dead ends where the rocks fell and buried them alive. He knew every path, every shadow, every hiding place in those mountains. He had played here as a child. He had climbed these rocks with his grandfather. Now he used that knowledge to kill. His people learned from him. They became ghosts too. Perfected her EMP grenades until they could knock out an entire squad. Minyu trained everyone in close combat, teaching them where to cut, where to stab, where to strike for maximum damage. Others learned to set traps, to gather intelligence, to move without sound or trace. They were 17 people against an army. They were winning. Word of the ghost spread beyond the mountains. Other survivors heard the stories. Other resistance groups learned their techniques. EMP designs were smuggled out and reproduced across the country. Minyu's fighting methods were taught in basements and bunkers from Seoul too. The aliens grew afraid. Their commanders reported strange things. Soldiers who refused to go underground. Units that broke formation at the slightest sound. Officers who swore they saw the ghost in their dreams, standing in the shadows with blood on his hands. On the 42nd day, High Command made a decision. They could not catch the ghost. They could not kill him in the darkness, so they decided to destroy the darkness itself. The orbital strike came at dawn. Saw it coming. He had been watching the sky all night, knowing that someday they would give up trying to fight and simply burn the mountain down. When the first flash appeared overhead, he gathered his people one last time. "Go," he told them. "Use the deep tunnels, get as far as you can." Grabbed his arm. "Captain, come with us, we can make it together." Shook his head. "Someone needs to stay, someone needs to make sure they don't follow." He pressed something into her hand, the letter, the one he had written to his family. "Give this to my wife, tell her I loved her, tell my daughter her father died standing." Was crying. She was 19 years old and she had seen more death than most soldiers see in a lifetime, but she had never felt pain like this. "I will, Captain," she whispered. "I promise." Turned and walked toward the cave entrance. Behind him, his people fled into the deep places of the mountain. Above him, fire began to fall from the sky. He picked up his rifle and stepped into the light. His final transmission reached Seoul 17 minutes later. The voice was calm, almost peaceful. "They can have the mountain," he said. "We've already won." The bombardment lasted for 3 hours. When it was over, the mountain had turned to glass. Nothing survived on the surface. Nothing could. But deep underground, 16 people emerged from the tunnels. They carried his teachings with them. They carried his courage. They carried a letter that would eventually reach a widow in and a little girl named. And they carried something else. A promise. The aliens had killed the ghost. They had burned his mountain. They had won the battle. But they had lost something far more important. They had given humanity a martyr, a symbol, a name to rally behind. Captain was dead. But his war had just begun. The Galactic Council chamber was silent as death. Ambassador stood at the podium, his scales pale with exhaustion and shame. Around him, 47 species waited for answers. They had heard his words. They had seen his fear, but they still did not understand. How could primitives defeat the... It was impossible. Everyone knew it was impossible. They had conquered 11 worlds. They had crushed species that had space travel, energy shields, weapons that could crack planets in half. And they had lost to creatures who still burned dead plants for fuel. "Show us," High Arbiter said. Her voice was cold. "Show us your evidence, make us believe." Nodded slowly. He reached into his robes and pulled out a device smaller than his palm. "I have brought recordings from the invasion," he said. "Our commanders saved everything. Every battle, every loss, every moment of horror." He pressed a button, and light filled the chamber. The first recording showed the landing. Ships descending through clouds, soldiers marching out in perfect formation. The humans below looked small and weak, running through streets, screaming, falling beneath plasma fire. It looked like every other conquest. Easy, quick, inevitable. "This is day one," said. "We believed the operation would be over within the week." The image changed. Now it showed a different scene. A narrow street in a human city, buildings burning on either side. In the center, a group of soldiers was surrounded. Not by an army, not by tanks or weapons or anything the Council would recognize as a threat. By people. Ordinary people, men and women and elderly and young. They carried metal pipes, glass bottles with burning cloth, kitchen knives, wooden boards with nails driven through them. They were screaming words that the translation software struggled to interpret. And they were winning. "Our soldiers had personal shields," said quietly. "The shields could stop bullets, explosions, direct hits from vehicle weapons. They could not stop 100 hands pulling a soldier to the ground. They could not stop teeth and fingers and the weight of bodies." The hologram showed a soldier disappearing beneath a wave of humans. His screams lasted for almost a minute. Delegate made a sound of disgust. "This is barbaric, they're animals." "Yes," agreed. "That is what we thought too, until we understood what we were really seeing." He changed the image again. This recording was from a different location, a mountain range. The timestamp showed it was 3 weeks into the invasion. A patrol was moving through dense forest, sensors scanning for threats. Everything looked calm. Then the first soldier fell. No one saw what hit him. He simply dropped, blood pouring from a wound in his neck. The others raised their weapons, but there was nothing to shoot. The forest was empty. A second soldier fell, then a third. By the time the patrol commander ordered a retreat, only 4 of the original 12 remained. They ran for their extraction point, and the camera captured their faces. These were warriors, trained from birth to feel no fear. Now they were terrified. "They called him the Ghost," said. "One human, just one. He killed 37 of our soldiers over 6 weeks. We sent hundreds to hunt him. He killed them too." He paused the recording on a single frame. It showed a shadow at the edge of the trees. A human shape, barely visible, watching the fleeing soldiers with patient eyes. "We never captured him," continued. "In the end, we had to burn the entire mountain from orbit. We turned it to glass. And still, some of his followers escaped. They carried his techniques to other regions. They taught others how to fight." High Arbiter's compound eyes narrowed. "One soldier cannot explain your defeat, Ambassador. What else happened?" Was silent for a long moment. Then he changed the recording again. This image was different from the others. It showed a road in a rural area, simple buildings on either side, fields of some kind of plant stretching into the distance. In the middle of the road sat a human. She was old, very old. Her skin was wrinkled, her hair white, her body bent with age. She sat in a chair with wheels, blocking the path of a convoy that stretched back for hundreds of meters. Her name was, said. She was 87 years old. Our intelligence learned that she had lived through a previous conflict on this planet, something they called the Korean War. Her parents had been killed in that war. Her village had been destroyed. The recording showed soldiers approaching the old woman. They gestured for her to move. She did not move. They pointed weapons at her. She did not move. They shouted commands in a language she could not understand. She did not move. One of the soldiers reached for her. The explosion was enormous. When the smoke cleared, there was a crater where the old woman had been sitting. 7 soldiers lay dead around it. The convoy was in chaos, vehicles burning, soldiers screaming. She had built a bomb, said. Our analysts said it was crude, primitive, made from farming chemicals and kitchen supplies. She must have known it would kill her. She built it anyway. He turned off the hologram and faced the council. This happened again and again, he said. Humans who knew they would die, choosing to take us with them. Mothers who threw themselves in front of our weapons to buy their children time to escape. Fathers who drove vehicles full of explosives into our positions. Children who led our soldiers into traps and never came out. His voice was rising now, raw with emotion he could not control. We have conquered 11 species. We have ruled the stars for 10,000 years, and we have never seen anything like the humans of Earth. Delegate spoke up, his tentacles writhing with unease. Surely your orbital weapons could have ended this. You could have destroyed their cities, their infrastructure, their ability to fight. We did, said. We destroyed 17 of their cities, millions dead in seconds, and do you know what happened? He pulled up one final recording. It showed a human command center. Screens everywhere showing damage reports, casualty numbers, maps covered in red. In the center stood a woman in uniform. Her face was hard. Her eyes were empty of everything except cold, burning hate. This is General, said. She took command of their defense forces after we killed most of their leaders. She unified their nuclear weapons under a single command, and she sent us this message. The recording played. General's voice was flat, emotionless, terrifying. You have taken our homes. You have killed our families. You have burned our cities, and still we stand. If you do not leave our world within one cycle, we will glass our own planet before we let you have it. We would rather die free than live as slaves. This is not a negotiation. This is a promise. Behind her, missiles were visible on the screens, hundreds of them, aimed at every major population center on Earth, aimed at the planet's own surface. The recording ended. The chamber was silent. We analyzed the message, said quietly. We ran simulations. We consulted our best psychological experts. He looked around at the council, his eyes haunted. She was not bluffing. None of them were. They would have destroyed their entire world rather than let us have it. High Arbiter spoke, and for the first time there was fear in her ancient voice. What did you do? Gathered his documents. His hands were shaking again. We left, he said. We packed our ships and we left, because we finally understood what we were dealing with. He walked toward the exit. The humans have a word, he said over his shoulder. They call it Han. It means a sorrow so deep it becomes strength, a grief that transforms into rage, a determination that does not end with death. He paused at the door. They will never forget what we did to them. They will never forgive. And someday, when they reach the stars, they will come looking for us. He left. The council sat in silence. And somewhere, far away, the humans were already building their first starships. High Arbiter had lived for 300 years. In that time, she had seen empires rise and fall. She had watched species discover fire and learn to split atoms. She had presided over treaties that ended wars and declarations that started them. She thought she had seen everything. She had never felt fear like this. The council chamber was in chaos. Representatives were shouting at each other in a dozen languages. The crystal walls flickered through colors so fast they were almost painful to look at. Some delegates were demanding action. Others were calling for calm. A few had already left, rushing to send warnings to their raised her limbs and called for silence. It took several minutes for the chamber to quiet. "We must discuss what we have heard," she said. Her voice was steady, but those who knew her could see the strain beneath. "Ambassador has made serious claims. We must decide what to do about them." Delegate was the first to speak. His tentacles were still shaking. "This changes nothing," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Earth is a primitive world in a backwater sector. Even if the failed, that doesn't mean the humans pose any real threat. They don't have faster-than-light travel. They can't reach us." "Yet," said another delegate. Her name was, and she represented a species of energy beings who had learned caution over millions of years of existence. "They cannot reach us yet, but they will. Every species develops FTL eventually. It is only a matter of time." "Time we can use to prepare," countered. "We could destroy them before they become a threat. A single fleet, a few orbital strikes, and the problem is solved forever." Shook her head slowly. "Did you not listen to Ambassador's testimony? The tried orbital strikes. It did not break the humans, it made them stronger." "Then we destroy the entire planet," said. "No survivors, no revenge." "And if we miss some?" asked. "If a few of them survive, hiding in bunkers or caves or the depths of their oceans, if they rebuild, remembering what we did, they would not just come for the then, they would come for all of us." The chamber fell silent. Turned to address the full council. "I propose we examine this situation from a different angle," she said. "We know what the humans did to the. Let us consider why they did it." She activated the central hologram herself. Images appeared, pulled from records, human broadcasts, and intelligence gathered over years of distant observation. "Earth has a long history," said. "Even by our standards, it is a violent history. The humans have fought wars among themselves for as long as they have existed. They have killed millions of their own kind over territory, religion, resources, and ideas. By every measure we use to assess civilizations, they should have destroyed themselves long ago." The images showed human conflicts, ancient battles with swords and arrows, modern wars with bombs and missiles, cities burning, bodies in the streets, horror upon horror upon horror. "But they didn't destroy themselves," continued. "Instead, they survived, they rebuilt, they grew stronger. Each war taught them something new about how to fight. Each defeat made them more determined to win the next time." She paused, letting the images speak for themselves. "When they invaded, they expected the humans to react like every other species, to see superior force and surrender, to choose survival over resistance." She turned off the hologram. They did not understand what they were dealing with. The chamber was silent, every eye was on. "The humans do not surrender," she said. "They never have, not to each other, not to anyone. In their entire history there has never been a conquering force that broke their spirit permanently. They may lose battles, they may lose wars, but they remember, they wait, and they come back." Delegate made a sound of frustration. "Then what do you suggest we do? Invite them to join the council. Welcome the species that killed 200,000 soldiers with rocks and kitchen knives." "Yes," said. The chamber erupted. It took almost an hour to restore order. When the shouting finally died down, spoke again. "I have been High Arbiter for 3 centuries," she said. "In all that time, I have learned one lesson above all others. The greatest threat to any civilization is not the enemy you face today. It is the enemy you create for tomorrow." She gestured at the empty space where holograms had played. "If we attack Earth, we make enemies of the humans forever. If we destroy their planet, we risk creating survivors who will dedicate their existence to revenge. If we do nothing, they will reach the stars eventually and remember that we let them suffer alone." Her compound eyes swept across the chamber. "But if we reach out to them, if we help them rebuild, If we offer them partnership instead of domination, she paused, perhaps we can turn a potential enemy into an ally. Was nodding slowly. It is a risk, but a smaller one than the alternatives. It is foolishness, snapped. You cannot befriend a species like this. You have seen what they do to their enemies. Do you think they would treat us any differently? I think they would treat us exactly as we treat them, said. That is my point. The debate continued for hours, days, weeks. The Galactic Council argued about Earth and humanity and what should be done. They brought in experts. They analyzed data. They ran simulations and consulted ancient histories. In the end, they reached a decision. Earth would be quarantined, not attacked, not destroyed, but isolated. Warning beacons would be placed throughout the Sol system. Every navigation database in the galaxy would list it as a restricted zone. No species would be permitted to contact the humans until the Council decided it was safe. It was a compromise, a delay, a way of pushing the problem into the future. But some among the Council knew the truth. They could not avoid the humans forever. Someday, human ships would leave Earth. Human explorers would find the beacons. Human scientists would decode the warnings and understand that they were being watched. And then the real test would begin. On Earth, the humans knew nothing of these debates. They were too busy rebuilding, too busy mourning their dead, too busy looking up at the stars and wondering who else was out there. Received the letter 6 months after the mountain burned. A young woman named brought it to her, along with a medal and a folded flag. Read the letter alone in her bedroom while her daughter played outside, not understanding why her mother was crying. Had written about simple things. The way's hair looked in morning light, the sound of laughter, the small house they had planned to buy when he retired. He wrote about love and hope and the future he wanted to build. And at the end, he wrote about duty. If you are reading this, he said, then I did not come home. I am sorry. I wish I could have held you again, kissed our daughter again, lived the life we dreamed about. But some things are more important than one man's happiness. Some things are worth dying for. Freedom is one of them. Our home is another. You and are both. Kept the letter in a box beside her bed. She read it every night before she slept, and she raised her daughter to remember her father's sacrifice. Grew up hearing stories about the ghost of the mountain. She learned to be strong. She learned to be brave. She learned that humans do not kneel. 20 years later, she became an engineer on humanity's first starship. The day the ship launched, stood at a window and watched Earth shrink behind her. In her pocket was her father's letter, worn soft from years of reading. Around her, a crew of humans from every nation prepared to make history. They were going to the stars. And they were not afraid. The humans had survived the first test. They had faced an enemy from beyond their world and refused to break. Now they were ready for whatever came next. Somewhere in the galaxy, 47 species watched and waited. They remembered Ambassador's warning. They remembered the footage of humans fighting with rocks and fire and bare hands. They remembered the cold eyes of General and the explosion that killed Grandmother. They knew the humans were coming. And they were terrified. They had learned their lesson. The Council had been warned. But the future was not yet written. Perhaps the humans would prove to be enemies. Perhaps they would prove to be friends. Perhaps they would be something else entirely, something the galaxy had never seen before. Only time would tell. But one thing was certain. Humanity was awake. And the universe would never be the same.